Hi, I'm Mia Friedman, and I'm a little bit croaky, but welcome to No Filter. On a Saturday afternoon back in 2012, I was sitting in a nail salon crying. I don't usually cry while I'm getting a manicure. They're just nails after all. But I was reading a Vanity Fair story about a little boy called Saroo, who lived in Hobart with his adopted parents and who had recently tracked down his birth mother in an obscure little village in India. If you've seen the movie Lion or read the book A Long Way From Home, you already know this story. If you haven't, let me fill you in. Sue Brierley grew up as one of 3 children living in a tiny shed with their mother, who collected rocks in a nearby quarry to try and support her young family. He was just 4 or 5 when he and his older brother, Gadu, went to a nearby train station to look for dropped coins to bring home to their mum. The boys became separated when Saroo fell asleep, and Saroo ended up on a train alone, thousands of miles away, unable to find his way back home. He had even further to travel, all the way to Hobart in fact, where he was sent from the Indian orphanage he'd eventually wound up in. Less than a year after he'd become lost, Sue and John Brierley welcomed little Saroo into their home and their hearts with open arms.
He had that little Qantas bag on his shoulder. He had that blob of melted chocolate in his hand. He had the Tassie t-shirt on, and he just had the biggest eyes that you could imagine.
A couple of years later, they adopted a second son from India. His name was Mantosh. But while Saroo thrived, his big brother's path through life wouldn't be nearly as smooth due to the abuse and the neglect he experienced before he arrived in Australia. More about Mantosh's journey a bit later. When Saroo grew up, miraculously, arduously, he spent years using Google Earth and his patchy memories of his early life in India to identify the small rural village where he'd lived. He travelled there and, against all odds, he found his mother. I can still barely think about that reunion without crying again. Back in the nail salon, crying, I texted my friend Tom Lalone, who was then the EP of 60 Minutes, to tell him about the story. 60 Minutes paid for Saroo to go back to visit his biological mother, this time taking his mother Sue with him. And that reunion was, oh my God, well, you can imagine. Next, by pure coincidence, my cousin Emil Sherman, the Oscar-winning producer of films such as The King's Speech and Macbeth, beat out a whole bunch of giant film companies from all over the world to win the rights to turn Saroo's story into a movie. Lion was released last year and went on to be nominated for several Oscars. Sue Brierley never imagined her life would play out publicly, let alone in movie theatres all over the world. She was an ordinary woman from Hobart. But by the end of 2016, that's exactly what happened to Sue. She was sitting in a movie theatre in the middle of Hollywood, watching Nicole Kidman, who by then she found herself calling a close friend, play her in the incredibly moving film about her family. Behind her in that theatre, at that premiere, was Bill Clinton, sobbing quietly in the dark, just like I did, and probably you did. I went with my parents and my kids when we went to see Lion, and it's really hard not to cry. The movie and the story is just so good. Saroo has done a lot of interviews, but as a mother and as a woman, I wanted to interview Sue. I had so many questions for her. I wanted to know about her other son, Mantosh, about how she felt when she found out Saroo had been secretly trying to find his birth mother, and what those unbelievable reunions felt like for her. So I called up Sue for a chat at her home in Hobart when I had a better voice. It's the home that you see in the movie Lion. And there are little bits of noise in the background of parts of this interview. There were some planes flying overhead a few times. But I was so riveted by Sue's words and her story, I barely noticed. Here's Sue Brierley. Hi, Sue.
Hello.
So lovely to meet you. I wanted to start by asking you, tell me about the day that you went to collect Saroo from the airport.
Well, that was a wonderful time because, as it turned out, things were working really well with the adoption program. It was being really, for all intents and purposes, managed by a parent group in Victoria. So there were quite a few applications that were being processed in India at the same time. In fact, there was 8. So it turned out there were 8 little ones coming into the airport in Melbourne. So on the night, the flight came in at about 11 p.m. as they do, and we 8 families virtually met there in the VIP lounge. And, so someone was relating, oh, the plane's landed, they'd run back down, oh, it's here, it's on the runway, and so on. We're all winding up with excitement. And then, oh, no, they're in the customs area, they're coming through shortly, and the tension was just building up and up and up. So finally, this door opened, and there was this corridor, just sort of had cream walls, and this trail of children and adults started sort of moving up. But as it happened, Saroo and Asra that he came through with, they came through first, and there was Saroo. He had that little Qantas bag on his shoulder. He had that blob of melted chocolate in his hand. He had the Tassie T-shirt on, and he just had the biggest eyes that you could imagine, because maybe he was quite scared. I'm assuming he must have had a quite heightened level of anxiety. So in he came, and I knew that I just sort of couldn't rush up to him and pick him up and hug him, because I didn't want to frighten him. So one of the ladies, one of the escorts, sort of just quietly, as they were at the front, led him over with his hand and held his hand and sort of pointed to us and said, "This is your mother and father, mum and dad." And then she just sort of vaporised out of it, and it was just the 3 of us.
And then how did he tell you about his mum?
Well, as he started school pretty well a week later and started to learn English, as he got the words, we'd use talking about things as an English lesson. So as time went on, and I'm assuming you've seen the film live.
Absolutely.
There's the moment where I'm portrayed talking to Saroo in the bar.
So you've come a long way, haven't you? I'm sure it hasn't been easy. And one day you'll tell me all about it.
And we'd have these conversations nightly in the bath. Of course, in the beginning, he didn't have a clue what I was saying. He was just looking at me and playing and, just loving. He loved having a bath. Anyway, so I'd be yakking away but very soon he got language, probably got quite good communication after about 12 months. And so we started talking about things. And of course, I was writing them in my diary. Everything he told me, I was writing it down as we went along, just, plotting his, schooling and so forth, things that were going on, things he seemed to cope with. I was writing it all down. And as time went along, we sort of had a little exercise where I drew the map I don't know if you see any reference to the diary in any of the interviews that you might have seen. But anyway, so I drew things like his house, it's a little square, and then he'd sort of say, you go along here, you go left, you go right, you come here, here's my house. And he's sort of saying all of this, and you go in the door, and I'd say things like, oh, where is your bed? Oh, the bed is here. And I say, where do you sleep? I sleep there, and Shakila is there, and Gudu is there, and Kalu is there. And I thought, blimey, it looks really small. And I said, what about your mother? Oh, she's not there so much. She spent a lot of time away working. And, there's sort of a grey area. She'd go off and be gone for days, really. And the children were just really looking after themselves. And, but the thing is, when I went there, the thing I felt walking along in the slums there, they're all looking out for each other. You don't belong here. What's going on there? They're all connected.
So a strong sense of community.
Yes, yes. And, I really felt that firsthand. And so that's how they were growing up. They were sort of like in a giant extended family in the middle of this slum area. And just the fact that Saroo found his way through that maze was incredible, really.
Did he see, with his ability now to look back and remember what he was thinking as a little kid, did he see you as temporary, or did he ever express any desire to go back and find his mother and his siblings when he was little?
No, certainly not. As he sort of got attached to us, and that was quite quick, we'd have this little sort of saying. I studied a lot about children transitioning from one family to another and read a lot of material. I had 16 years to check it out, really. And so I knew a bit about the process, and I know there's sort of like a honeymoon period where a new child will come into a family and be absolutely wonderful. Also, while that's going on, he was just, as he said, learning like magic. So the communication's growing, the feeling and emotion is growing, and it's all building up and up. And then suddenly the child thinks, how committed are these people? They want to test you. And so they start being a bit out of character, naughty, or doing things that aren't things that they've done before. And Saroo did that. And, so I wasn't surprised it started happening, but that to me was this absolute wonderful indication that he was invested emotionally, that he really loved us. It wasn't us just loving him and holding him. We were enjoying his love. And when that behaviour validates that they've begun to love you.
And that they feel secure in your love.
Yes. So they sort of test you out a bit as if to say, well, look, I'll do a few naughty things. I'll soon find out if they send me packing or if it's, Anyway, we did talk a bit about this, and I also had my friend talk to him in Hindi as well, just to convince him, look, don't be naughty, you're going to be here for the rest of your life, everything's going to be okay, just to give him security. And as soon as we could, we went through the adoption confirmation. We had to go back to a court again and get our adoption legalised in the final step. And so we did that, and we went off to court, and he was so excited, and he said, does this mean I'm now your really, really son? Oh, it was just beautiful.
That's gorgeous. And then when did you become aware that he was looking for his biological mother?
When he told us he had found her.
Oh. So he'd been doing it privately for years, right?
Yeah. But you see, he'd been living with his girlfriend at that time. We didn't see a lot of him. He was working in our business. He was going to work. He was always late. It was quite frustrating for John, really, because he's, very work obsessed. And, we couldn't figure out what was going on. He was tired all the time, but he was on a big journey every night, And I knew things at times were quite prickly with his girlfriend. And, she was probably fed up to the back teeth of it too. And, so it turned out just one morning out of the blue, he went into John at the office and just said, look, Dad, I think I've found where I come from. And John just said, look, he was shocked because we just didn't know he was searching. We knew whatever he was doing once he went home to his girlfriend's place. We didn't really know what was going on. So, but you see, I think really, I've talked to Saroo a bit about that. There's various reasons he didn't share that with us. And a lot of it is social, because adoption in Australia has got a very checkered reputation. We've gone through all those years of sadness where my friends, my generation of girls, if they got pregnant, it was an absolute shameful thing and their children were snatched away and given up for adoption. So that's just such a sad time. And so down the track, those women have become mothers again. And, there's a lot of sadness attached to that. And then further on, Australia moves into we're a bit over the sad thing now, but we're moving into the sorry. We've got to be so sorry for what we did, sorry for the taking of the Aboriginal children, and sorry for this and sorry that. So adoption in Australia is really a melding of sad, sorry,
guilt, regret,
impossible,
shame, anger, a whole lot of stuff, yeah.
Those words. So
did he feel like he was betraying you on some level by looking for his biological mother?
I'm sure he didn't, because, we'd talk about this, and I was just desperate for his mother to know. At night I'd quite often in my prayer, my little blurb that I have put together myself, I'd send her, he's just so beautiful, and if you could see him now. I was just so desperate to try and send her a message through the heavens to tell her that her beautiful son was alive and well and happy. Because, he didn't drop to earth like Mr. Bean. I knew he had his mother still. I hoped she was still alive. I had no way of knowing, but I just felt it was it was good for me to just acknowledge my blessing every night, I feel. So that's what I did. And that's why at the end, when I met her, and it's shown in the 60 Minutes documentary.
How did that come about? Because when Saroo went over to meet her, he went by himself?
Yes.
That was obviously something he felt he had to do alone.
Yes, which sort of did concern us, obviously. So, off he went and he succeeded. Of course, I was sort of more worried, really, that he wouldn't find his family there, that they would have moved or whatever. But anyway, he succeeded. It was wonderful. So when he was there, of course, in the slums, everybody knows what's going on. You can hear and see everything that's going on. And so it virtually created a mini riot in the slum area. Everyone came squashing into this little lane, trying to sort of fit in the lane and look into the door into Cumla's house. And, it was really, there was hooting and cheering, and, it was just like the whole place had won the lottery. And it did have a special significance too, because it's a very auspicious thing. You're truly a blessed person, and he is considered amongst a lot of Indian people to be a very blessed person. How sometimes we'll say people seem very worldly. In a lot of cultures, people are twice born, and that's very auspicious and so forth. But for him to come and find his mother, and for her in her community, for her to have one of her sons return, elevated her to a higher level. And the community absolutely loved it and was embracing this absolute miracle that had occurred. So very soon, because he was there about a week, the local newspaper came along, then another newspaper, a journalist came from Berhampore. Suddenly there were all these media things happening. People were putting pictures on Facebook. I've seen this man who's come from Australia after being there for 25 years, and it just spread through the media.
I imagine he called you while he was in India after he'd met his biological mother. What was that conversation like?
Well, it was pretty intense, and in fact it wasn't actually a call, it was a text. Anyway, I've still got it on my phone because it was the most beautiful message that I've ever received, and it was about, I don't know, it must have been about 3 a.m. in the morning here, 2 or 3, in the middle of the night anyway. And we were quite on edge after he'd left, we sort of thought, oh. Anyway, and we just really didn't know what to expect. But as soon as the phone went ping, I jumped up out of bed and grabbed it and started reading, and I couldn't believe my eyes. And he sent through a picture of his mother with him, just a selfie. And I just couldn't believe it. But he just basically said, look, I've found my family. They are, real. They're here. I found my mother, and she's so happy and thanks you for bringing me up. And says she's just happy to see me again and won't intervene in any way. So she's saying that she's just happy knowing she's got one of her sons alive.
It must. I note that you quite unselfconsciously refer to her as his mother, and I've often wondered about how adoptive parents feel about biological parents. I feel like I would feel very threatened.
Yes, well, I've never had that, and a lot of people ask about it. If she wasn't there, I wouldn't have Saroo. He had to be born of someone. So where's the threat in that? That's the absolute gift of it.
And so then you decided that you were going to go and meet her. Tell me about how that day unfolded. Were you nervous?
I was, but I was so super excited. It was just, because, what a miracle. I mean, I know there's lots of families get reunions and it's great. Sometimes it's not great. Sometimes young people find that their first family is a great disappointment, or not even there, or they can't find them, they don't want to find them. There's just so many different perspectives and, ways of, because it was going to be filmed, I knew that was all, going on. But the funny thing was, I got in the car from the hotel and Saroo was there with me. So was Alison Langdon, 60 Minutes journalist. She was gorgeous. Anyway, so we drove sort of as far as we could into the area, and then you can't drive any further. You've got to get out and walk through the streets of like little lanes. And so we sort of walked along, and just up ahead, Saroo was holding my hand, and I'm sure I was shaking. I really was in a very heightened state of anxiety. But anyway, I knew she was there. I knew I was going to meet her. I had my son by my side, and what more could I wish for? It was an absolute miracle that was going to happen to me within seconds. And we came around the corner, and then I could see this little huddle of people up ahead, and I saw a woman in the middle, and she had the orange spotty sari on, and I just sort of straight away knew it was her. And then Saroo said, oh, there they are up there. And so we just walked up ahead, and she put out her hand, and I held her hand, and Saroo was there, he sort of seemed to be holding us both.
This is my mother, Kamala.
Hi.
Kamala, this is my mother, Sue.
Oh, it was just a feeler. She was as frail as a bird. So then I wanted to ask her a couple of things. So there was Savitri Shroudy. She was the fixer that was working with the team, with the 60 Minutes team. So she was acting as the translator. So I said, I wanted to ask a couple of questions. First of all, I said, thank you for your son. I've done my best. I'm so thankful that I've had your son in my life. So, we were hugging quite tightly by then. And I said, I want to ask a question. Did she always feel Saroo was alive? She said, yes. Oh, and then that really started to affect me. So I thought, all those years believing that he's alive. So then that really upset me. And I felt for her, and I'm holding this frail woman. So I started to cry. And, I sort of started to get quite overwhelmed with this thought of her, all that time, 25 years, she'd seen the mangled body of her eldest son. She never saw Saroo. And, he was such a beautiful little boy that, you could tell they had love. And then she thought I was panicking and crying because I would lose my son. So Savi said, oh, because she was talking away and I couldn't understand the thing she said. So she's saying, don't cry, don't cry. And she's stroking my face and trying to wipe away the tears like this and saying, don't cry. And I just couldn't stop crying. And then she said to Savi, tell her this. Tell her I give her my son.
He's your son. Take good care of him.
So that was said. Well, quite honestly, that just undid me. I was nearly legless. I thought I was going to pass out. She gave me her son. He was standing there in the dirt. She's been through 25 years of help. I'm crying like a sop. I've had the most blessed life. And she's worried about me being upset and gives me her son. It was pretty astounding.
I can't even imagine the intensity of emotion in that moment. Had you imagined that maybe one day you would meet her? Had you ever dared even to imagine that?
I sort of did, because I've always felt Saroo was a really special person. And I know every mother says that, but I just sort of somehow had a quiet feeling about things, that, because, a lot of people, John said, oh, look, as if this is going to happen. Don't even sort of think of it. But I just quietly was accepting the fact that, yes, this would come about.
You have two sons, and Mantosh is I was going to say a character in the movie. He's a real person, and the story that was told through him and what you experienced was that adoption isn't always seamless and isn't always, that transition isn't always easy. You must feel very protective of him and his story. How do you reconcile that, and how has Saroo reconciled that through the telling of his own story?
It was very difficult. It's obviously a very delicate thing. It's also something that could cause him further harm. And, he has had a bit of a crash after seeing the film and, quite shocked him really. When we went and saw it, we went up to Sydney and Mantosh was with us. When we went to see the final outcome of the film, and we were sitting there, the four of us in the theatre. John and I had already seen it at the rough edit stage about a year before, without Mantosh, it just wouldn't have worked. And Mantosh was very upset by it. But the thing is that it could have been a lot worse. I think in a way that it was handled as well as it could possibly be, apart from just ignoring the fact that he existed. And in the film, a lot more was told about Mantosh's life with the character Shondeep. So, a lot of people maybe wouldn't get the connection, but that's what happened to Mantosh.
Hey, Shondeep, chal, Shondeep, chal.
But it was important for people to see what can happen, to face up to the terrible things that are going on, and still to this day, of course. And I guess the best outcome out of it, a couple of things was that, Mantosh was obviously very upset, and it did unhinge his health for quite a while. He's still not right, but he's talking about it a bit more. He's got a new psychiatrist. He's actually started talking about those events, whereas before he was in absolute denial, that what had gone on. When he arrived here as a kid, all the backs of his hands had all been burnt and still had scabs from cigarette burns. So, as soon as I saw him, and I thought, oh my God, because we had trouble getting him out here. That's another whole story in itself. But I don't think it hurts. I think that sometimes I think I want people to start looking after the kids that need a home and promote adoption and so forth. And then I think, oh, they see all that terrible stuff about the trouble with Mantosh, and I think, oh, no one's going to think about it now.
But it's an important part of the story to tell, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's reminding us. The film, for me, takes a lot of people deep to, to a place they don't go to a lot, or choose not to go to, don't want to go to, don't want to know about, think badly of. But I'm trusting that humans go to see the film, it'll heighten their humanity, it'll make them man up and acknowledge things. Some of the stories I've had told they've just astounded me, the family stories, the things that people have felt they could say after seeing the film, admitting to troubles in their family, in their childhood. So I think it's a worthwhile thing for people to see.
It's sometimes said of motherhood that you're only as happy as your least happy child. So I kind of had this sense of you while you were watching Saroo experience this incredible happy ever after, and after all the work he put into retracing, finding his biological family and being reunited with his biological mother. At the same time, you had Mantosh, whose story is so much more complicated and who doesn't necessarily have that happily ever after in that same way.
That's right. It's very hard because obviously I'd love him to be as happy. He's an utterly sweet guy. He's super busted, but he's a sweet guy. He would have had all the potential of Saroo and could have even been more. Who knows what the outcome would have been. The problem is that when we wanted to bring Mantosh to us, he was 7. He'd been relinquished by his grandmother, and he was still quite a bright lad in reasonable health. But we couldn't get through the court because at that time the Australian departments were starting to get too nitpicking and pedantic about things. And so when we got to court, the judge wasn't keen on Mantosh coming to Australia. Oh, we want this form, we want that, we want endless this, that and the other, and we want that, blah, blah, blah. And virtually the process was in the beginnings of the end for Australian adoption in India. And so we got refused. We could not believe it. But it meant that Saroj couldn't keep Mantosh in her care anymore for protection and safekeeping while he waited to come to Australia once we'd accepted him. He had to go back to Lillooet for 2 years to be burnt, raped, beaten, you name it. And I'm very bitter about that. I'm bitter about the fact that I feel that our negative attitudes from a bureaucratic level impaired our application. It degraded the respect Australia should have had in the court over there when we as Australians wanted to bring this child here. A proven successful parents. I'm bitter about that. But then I'm really bitter about the fact that that judge just ruined my boy's life.
Did you feel like you were prepared?
For Mantosh?
Yeah, because you'd had such a seamless experience with...
Probably not, not for that level. And I couldn't get support for that need. I couldn't get the level of support. I couldn't get the psychiatric care I needed for him. He actually needed medication. And, there still was a lot of stigma about that. Oh, you wanted the kid, he's psycho, suck it up, lady, nick off. You would not believe how often I just walked out of, medical practices with that sort of attitude going on. Not that the words were ever spoken, but I'm no fool. I know what, there was a level of discrimination there, and I really couldn't get the care. So, by the time he was 14, he was in a shocking place, really, just not coping at all. I wasn't coping. I became ill, developed a really bad thyroid condition, and I was so crook. I've never been as ill in my life. I mean, I could have got that illness anyway, but I think the stress ongoing with Mantosh and just the absolute despair I was in, the failure of not being able to give him a happy life, it just really destroyed me there for a bit. Anyway.
How lucky was he, though, to have been placed with such a tiger mother like you?
I'm not a tiger, I'm a lioness.
Oh, yeah, very true.
Testing 1, 2.
It's a podcast about family life, normal family life, and then maybe not so normal.
Why can't you be like other mum?
Like, you know, how do you tell your 9-year-old you're going to prison?
You failed it.
Or how do you retire in your 30s and travel around the world with your baby?
You nailed it.
Can you have a wedding and not invite other people's children?
This glorious mess.
It's called This Glorious Mess.
Subscribe to us in iTunes or your favourite podcast app.
To something more superficial, you don't strike me as the type of person who would be remotely impressed by anything that goes on in Hollywood. So I can't imagine that you were particularly a flutter when you heard that Nicole Kidman was going to play you. How did that all play out?
Oh, well, because, you know, obviously there had to be someone playing me. Once, you know, the deal was done, you know, and we had a meeting with Emil and we said, oh, okay, you can make a film, you know, it was sort of...
Did you put in any requests?
I sort of said, we talked about it at home, like we sort of said, oh, well, who will it be? And I said, well, for me, it has to be Nicole Kidman. I mean, she's the most famous, gorgeous Australian actress. Really, I mean,
With red hair.
I just thought, wow, what else do you want? But the script went off to Cannes, to the film festival there, and a lot of the actors see the projects on offer. They're tabled there, and she saw it there, or someone of her team did. And she said she wanted it, and it took about really probably 6 months or so to negotiate it all. They looked at, I think it was Tilda Swinton for a bit, and you know, and I'm thinking, oh my God, you know.
Nicole brought your beautiful warmth. She said the most extraordinary things about you in interviews.
And that's what I find really fascinating about Sue, is that she's just a lover. She just wants to love and give. And I relate to that, where you just go, you're my baby now, you're my child, and I'm going to do everything I can to take care of you and love you.
It sounds like you two have forged quite the connection, and she's been incredibly taken and moved and connected with you.
Yes. I think we certainly did connect. She made, you know, she went to a lot of effort to meet me. She sent her colleague to spend days with me interviewing and recording me so she could practice my mannerisms and so forth. You know, she did really put a lot of effort into it. And I was very thankful for that, because I wanted, you know, authenticity. And the only thing that wasn't authentic was those terrible wigs and the black clothes.
I saw the photos at the end of the film. They weren't that far off. I thought they were exaggerated, and then they showed the photos, and I was like, wow, that's some haircut.
My bob was a very trendy asymmetrical hair. You know, I didn't have that mumsy sort of tousled perm look.
How did you feel towards Dev Patel and the little boy that played Saroo when he was tiny? Was it strange? Did you feel quite maternal towards them after seeing the film?
Yes, I did. It was absolutely delightful because, you know, I was just, you know, I look at it this way, that how many people get to rerun precious parts of their life? It was quite, you know, magical, the intensity of it, how close they were. I mean, Dev really did turn into Saroo, and at times, you know, when I hugged him at the end of the filming in Melbourne, he actually felt like Saroo. It was so nice. And the same with little Sonny, he just felt like my little Saroo. So it was like fast forward or fast reverse like Doctor Who kind of stuff, you know, to have your life in front of your nose like that.
To watch it all again.
It was great.
How are the
I've
Oscars?
always been determined about that. I mean, it was going to happen regardless. I either made a misery of it or the best I could. I would have actually even loved more involvement in the process because I'm that kind of person. I'm very secure about what's in front of my nose. I can see what's going on, I can deal with it, but I hate the unknown. The unknown is my enemy, and I've always been like that. I can deal with anything as long as I can have it in front of me.
How were the Oscars?
It was fun. It was a real education, I can tell you. It's quite a bizarre spectacle. It was obviously very disappointing because I just feel everyone had made such a good job of the film. It was so unique, different, and it was a worthwhile film. I feel that we gave up our lives and privacy for a purpose, and I think that it has had a huge impact on so many people, but it wasn't acknowledged in that way by the whole hype of that process. And I almost sort of felt coming out of it, I mean, this is just like a process, an event that's really past its use-by date. I almost feel that about the Olympics too. I really just think, what in the hell are we doing?
It's like all the pomp and circumstance, and it's got so far removed from the actual what it is.
Well, look at the world. To me, it's just such a load of crap. People are starving, dying, killing each other, hating each other, killing each other for an imaginary God, and we're plodding around carrying on like the Academy Awards make a difference. I mean, it's lovely to be validated, but hey.
No wonder Nicole Kidman loves you. That's excellent. What is the relationship and the connection now between Saroo and his biological mother and also you and her?
Well, it's very hard because I don't speak any language with her, but Saroo's been back multiple times now. Of course, he was most lately back there to show her the film. And, you know, we've made a big difference there. He's made a big difference. He's bought the house where she waited 25 years. She doesn't have to work anymore. All her needs are taken care of. You know, that...
Would she ever come to Australia for a visit or...?
I don't know. Not at this stage. She's illiterate. She hasn't got a passport.
Yeah.
She hasn't at this stage shown any desire anyway. She's just happy that he goes and sees her now and again. And I think that's great too. And I'm not going to go in there and shove myself under her nose with regular interviews. I just want her to be peaceful and happy.
Thank you so much, Sue. That's just been such a fantastic opportunity to talk to you. I love the film. I've loved every aspect of the story and your part in it. That's why I really wanted to talk to you, because this idea of the lioness mother is just such a powerful one that comes through in the movie, and you're everything I'd hoped for and more. So both your boys are very, very lucky to have you as their mum.
Oh, you're kind. You're very kind.
I'm just hijacking your ears for 2 seconds to tell you some exciting news. I've written a book. It's called Work-Strife Balance, and it's for guilty friends, bad mums, crap wives, imperfect feminists, rebellious daughters, and any girl with a big mouth and at least one foot in it. It's for any woman who's ever asked, am I the only one who isn't coping? It has personal stories, life lessons, strategies for dealing with work and friends and overwhelm and anxiety and body issues and parenting and relationships. And if you pre-order now, you'll get access to a bonus 3-part sneak peek book podcast where I break down the chapters with my son, Luca Levine, who actually wrote one of them, and exclusive access to a Work-Strife Balance Kickstart webinar with me, where I will run you through all the tips, tricks and tools that I've learned in my 2 decades of being a parent, 1 decade running a women's media company, and 45 years of being a woman. Plus, if you order now, you'll get 20% off the retail price. Just go to miafriedman.com.au. This episode of No Filter was brought to you by Telstra Smart Home. Telstra brings you the magic of technology with Smart Home, a clever little app that lets you manage your home from anywhere, even this podcast studio as I'm doing right now. Lion is available on DVD from May 1. You should definitely check it out. It's on iTunes as well. And you can buy Saroo's book A Long Way From Home from iBooks at apple.co/Mamamia. While you're there, you can also find my book, Work Strife Balance, as well. And you can also subscribe to all of our podcasts in one place or download the Mamamia podcast app, and it will all be there for you. If you want to suggest a guest or just ask me a question, you can call the pod phone on 02 8999 9386. Do you know we got our first caller to the pod phone for this podcast? We get lots of calls for our other podcasts, particularly Mamamia Out Loud and This Glorious Mess, which is our parenting podcast and which my daughter is strangely completely obsessed with. But we got our first call after a listener heard my interview with Jason Brunston and his husband Aaron about their surrogate son Roman and the process by which Roman came to be born. And someone rang and offered their eggs for Jason and Aaron if they wanted to have another baby, because they were saying they really did, but getting eggs is very, very difficult, and they'd had a friend donate eggs the first time, but they didn't know if she was going to be up for it. So a wonderful No Filter listener called up and said she would donate her eggs. How great is that? You don't have to have eggs to donate to call the pod phone. You could just ring to say g'day, because that's a pretty high bar to live up to, isn't it? Today's show was produced by Eliza Ratliff, who was very excited about the egg call for the Mamamia Women's Network. The executive producer of podcasts is Monique Bowley, and the head of entertainment is Holly Wainwright. I'm Mia Friedman, and I will see you next time.